Hi there, Kaya Stanley here, the CEO of CRMBC, and I'm here with Mike McDonough, and we are going through his 70 tips from his book, The Employer's Guide to Workers' Comp. And he gave 70 different tips on ways to reduce your cost and increase your profit by managing your workers' comp program. And the one that we're going to talk about today is the importance of first report of injury. Tell us what you mean by that and how that saves money.
Okay, thank you. It's really something that's very important to all employers. Not all employers follow this, but I preach it so much because it is so valuable in controlling the cost of the claim. So, for example, we had a chef in the kitchen, and he had broken, I think it was a glass jar or something. Anyways, a piece of the glass had gotten inside of his sock, which he wasn't aware of. But anyways, he did notice some bleeding, and so he went and did some first aid, put some ointment on it, but didn't tell anybody. So about 3 days later, it became really red, and it was becoming infected. And we sent him to the clinic to have him evaluated. And so what happened was they found out that he was a diabetic. And so that's where the process had started. So that's why it was getting infected. He didn't treat it properly from the get-go, didn't clean the wound properly, didn't have it evaluated. So had he gone to the doctor day one, within 30 minutes of that injury, they would have done a history on him, and they would have realized that he had a history of diabetes. And so he would have received a certain amount of treatment from the get-go. And so we see this more often than not. If an employee strains themselves and don't tell their employer for a week that they hurt their back, but yet they're coming to work. And so what they're really doing is they're increasing the amount of inflammation. And so by not going to the doctor and having it evaluated within the first 30 minutes or an hour of that injury and getting the proper treatment or medicines, what happens is that injury becomes worse. So now the swelling is so bad that the doctor puts them off work. Now we're paying indemnity. Now we have to get into physical therapy. So now we have 6 treatments of physical therapy. Now that's not going well. So now we have to do injections, but now we have to lead into an MRI. So immediate reporting allows the employer to control the cost of that claim. And it really is a benefit to the injured employee because they're seeking treatment right away, which is going to benefit them in the long run. So by waiting, it does 2 things. It makes their condition worse, and it increases the cost of the claim dramatically.
So 2 questions for you. First is, if you're the employer, what are the things that you can do to make sure the employee is telling you? Because there's a lot of times that the employee hasn't told the employer. What's the employer's job in that situation?
That's a great question, and that comes up a lot. So we can't ask questions about prior history. So many times we'll talk to the employee, and the employee will say, well, I'm fine. I don't want to get back to the doctor. I don't want to go. So the employer will say, okay, get back to work. So we've seen situations where employees have, fainted after that, or, hit the floor and became unconscious, and we had to do a 911. So when an employee reports an injury to an employer, it's first and foremost that they understand the condition of that employee, because we don't know any underlying conditions. We don't know if it's elderly. We don't know if they have low blood sugar. We don't know if they're diabetic. It could be obesity. There could be all kinds of underlying issues. So what I recommend, which is also part of the book, is that immediate reporting is why you have, for example, a nurse triage or some telemedicine that you can get a medical professional online to diagnose and talk to that employee within minutes of that injury to determine whether they need to go to an urgent care or to an emergency room. Obviously, if it's serious enough, you call 911. But ultimately, it's about taking that word from that employee and just taking it seriously, regardless of how minor it is, and determining the best plan of action for that employee. Because when you control that injury and get it to the right facilities like the urgent care or the hospital, you're taking control of that injury and the cost of that injury, but more importantly, the care of that employee, which ultimately, if they seek and get evaluated and treated right away, they're going to return to work much sooner. So there's all kinds of factors that go into this. And it's not just about the savings. It's really about getting that employee, because you know what? It's not just getting them back to work. It's getting back to their families as well.
And also it's about having the right culture. so that the employer is like, we talk a lot about making sure you have someone in your organization that is focused on this and that is communicating with the employee, and the employee knows the method and knows that they should report, so that there isn't a situation where there's this injury out there that the employer has no idea that happened until it comes back litigated. So there's that. Also, you mentioned indemnity. Can you explain what you mean? What is an indemnity claim?
Indemnity claim is above a medical claim. So if an employee goes to the doctor and there's no further treatment, there's nothing that needs to happen, and they don't lose any time off work, or the employer is able to accommodate work restrictions, then there's no lost time. An indemnity claim is when an injury is such that the employee is put off work for any certain length of time, and the employer is unable to, based upon the job description, is unable to meet those temporary restrictions put on by the doctor. So they will tell their TPA or insurance company that they cannot accommodate. So then what happens is the insurance company or the TPA will set up a separate file, which is called an indemnity file, because now they're going to need a loss history as far as a wage statement for lost wages. And they normally go back over 12 months and then figure out what an average would be. And that employee's going to get 2/3 while they're off work, because the employer has been able to accommodate. So an indemnity is where the employer is actually paying for that injury, but they're paying for the employee being home and they're not being paid on payroll. So when it's coming out of the TPA or the insurance company, that's going to drive up the cost of the claim.
Thank you, Mike. That's all the time we have for today. Talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya.
Thank you.